Entering the capital city had become quite troublesome in recent times due to the presence of refugees outside the city walls. All the major gates of the capital were sealed shut. As Brian and Echo ventured into the refugee zone, they couldn't help but furrow their brows. The place was filled with ailing souls on the verge of collapse, their bodies oozing blackened blood and pus from festering wounds. The church claimed to distribute medicine, prompting crowds of infected individuals to surge towards the city gates, yet what awaited them was bows and crossbows from the guards atop the city gates. Roland devised a plan for Echo to employ her unique abilities, projecting her voice to specific areas or individuals. In this manner, the treatment was administered discreetly, avoiding any major commotion. Brian witnessed Echo parting her lips, but no sound escaped. However, those among the refugees turned their heads in response. In their mind, they heard a voice akin to that of an angel, guiding them toward the docks where they would receive a free cure. Soon, a group of people stumbled and rushed towards them, as if they had finally grasped a glimmer of hope. Brian began guiding the refugees, while other soldiers stepped forward to help lift the immobile patients lying on the ground. The procession swiftly grew to several hundred individuals, all making their way toward the canal docks. Many others noticed this sight and followed suit. Upon their return to the docks, soldiers had arranged bags filled with purified water on a long table. Standing beside the table, he informed the refugees that, by drinking these canteens, they would be cured. Simultaneously, he warned them that the church's words were all lies, and their so-called sacred medicine was merely a ploy to extract more money from the people, forcing them to grovel in gratitude for saving their lives. On the other hand, His Highness Roland not only brought the medicines but also demanded no payment. Yes, not even a single copper coin. This proclamation stirred unrest among the crowd. Although some were still skeptical. They had nothing to lose. The first person to consume the purified water soon experienced changes in their body. In disbelief, they tore open their clothes and watched as the black spots rapidly faded away. This medicine truly works. I'm healed, they exclaimed. As more people recovered, the crowd's reactions grew increasingly fervent. If it weren't for the soldiers maintaining order, it was likely that the long table holding the canteen of water would have been swarmed and toppled by the desperate refugees. The soldier in charge continued to speak loudly, proclaiming that His Highness Roland required a substantial workforce to the border town in the western frontier. Anyone willing to venture to the western lands and serve him would receive food, shelter, and wages. Of course, those who were not interested, worry not, as they would depart in 3 days. All the food for these 3 days would be provided by the merchant caravan for free. Brian was delighted to witness that not a single person from this group of several hundred chose to stay in the capital city. Instead, they all boarded the sailboats bound for the western frontier. As soon as a boat was filled to capacity, it set sail, followed by the empty vessels that gradually caught up. Under the command of Margaret, there was no pause in the operation. The treatments proceeded in an orderly manner, batch after batch of refugees being attended to. Suddenly, Brian noticed the first army stationed in the southern field springing into action. A small squad sprinted swiftly towards the northern bank of the canal, their hands firmly gripping their firearms. It appeared they had discovered individuals secretly attempting to escape by jumping off the ships, likely rats hiding among the refugees. They had already caught several rats, and once these individuals were apprehended, they immediately confessed their origins and purpose. Axe looked expressionless at the captured individuals. However, what surprised him was that the person on the ground appeared to be in good health, unlike someone who had already fallen ill. The first words he uttered were unexpected. He claimed he wasn't an enemy. He claimed to know Tassa. At this time, both Tassa and Brian quickly arrived. Tassa revealed that he was a subordinate of Black Hammer, acting on his orders to spread messages, but they hadn't anticipated him disregarding the risks of infection and infiltrating among the refugees. You deceived Black Hammer, and you deceived the skeleton fingers, Hill suddenly spoke. You're not working for Timothy, you serve His Highness Roland Wimbledon in the Western lands. Tassa looked at Hill and made a throat-slashing gesture toward Axe. This man knew too much. Hill continued, mentioning that he overheard the soldiers' conversation at the docks and expressed his willingness to serve His Highness. Axe drew his sword, not wanting to bring even the slightest threat to the border town, as Hill loudly stated, "I'm not a rat. I am an enemy of Timothy." A small crystal bottle fell out of his pocket. Hill went on, explaining that he had paid a hefty sum to acquire it from the black market, hoping it could help trip up Timothy and aid His Highness. Tassa looked at the small bottle in his hand. If it were a normal circumstance where he couldn't determine its authenticity, he would have no hesitation in killing Hill. However, fortunately, Nightingale was also present here. Hill began recounting his own story. He wasn't a destitute gambler, and his wife hadn't run away with someone else. Those were all fabrications he had made up. He was originally a member of a small acrobatics troupe, and although the troupe wasn't large, they had a close-knit bond. It was within the troupe that he met his wife. They fell in love and got married, quickly saving up their earnings in the capital city to buy a house. However, all of this was disrupted by Timothy's witch hunt operation. His soldiers, like rabid dogs, captured women on the streets, and his wife was one of the unfortunate victims. He believed that paying the ransom would secure her release. The warden accepted the ransom but did not set her free. Unexpectedly, the situation took a sharp turn, and when he was notified to come and collect her from the prison, all he found was a battered corpse. Hill angrily demanded justice, but in the end, the warden, the gang leader, and the guards were only sentenced to 10 lashes and fined 25 silver. This led Hill to vow revenge against the new king, and he hadn't anticipated that this decision would gain the approval of his entire acrobatics troupe. However, a group of actors without combat skills, wealth, or subordinates seeking revenge was an almost impossible goal. The only thing Hill could think of was to gather information about Timothy and provide it to his enemies, such as Queen Garcia. They all joined different underground organizations on the black market, infiltrating them to gather any clues and intel related to the new king. Hill secretly monitored Tassa and discovered that Tassa wasn't serving Timothy after all. The person Tassa truly served was Roland Wimbledon, the 4th Prince of Grey Castle. Tassa looked at Nightingale, and she smiled. Nightingale said, "Hill didn't lie, but whether he can be of use to Border Town is up to Tassa to decide." Hill looked at Nightingale and said, "Prince Roland is truly different. He not only strives to treat the refugees but also treats witches equally." Reflecting on his wife, he continued, "If Timothy were the same, my wife wouldn't have." Nightingale and Tassa exchanged a subtle smile. Tassa untied Hill and asked him to follow him into the city. In the evening, Tassa returned to the tavern with Hill. Hill acted as if nothing had happened, sitting across from Tassa with a slight restraint, just like on any other normal day. Tassa brought medication to treat the plague. A bottle of medicine from the church would cost 25 gold royal, but Tassa sneered, saying that they didn't need the church's medicine. He presented several canteens and said, a bag of medication would only cost 10 silver. Black Hammer didn't believe him right away and grabbed one to feed it to his ill member. Miraculously, the infected member was healed immediately. Black Hammer and his members hesitated, seeming to consider how to extract more profit from it, their eyes fixed on the pouch on the table. Tassa knew that selling the medication through the black market using rats wouldn't attract too much attention, but these individuals would surely not sell the medication at the price he gave them. The task entrusted to Tassa by Prince Roland was to thwart the church's conspiracy as much as possible. The goal was to make everyone understand that the church's medication was not the only cure for the plague, especially for those believers who had paid a high price for the sacred medicine. They would begin to doubt whether the spokesperson of the church was deceiving them. Tassa took out a dagger from his clothes, his tone turning cold. He forcefully stabbed the dagger into the table and threatened, "My employer is not a kind-hearted person. If you don't want to end up at the bottom of the ocean, it's better to restrain yourselves a bit. After all, only by staying alive do you have a chance to enjoy your fortune." To prevent others from reselling the medication, Tassa allowed each person to buy only one bag, and they had to use it on the spot. Black Hammer clenched his teeth, looking around at the 4 individuals in the room, and reluctantly accepted the task given by Tassa. In the grand hall of the cathedral, a high priest looked down upon a kneeling farmer at his feet. The once robust figure of the farmer had now hunched into a frail form. He knelt on the ground, confessing that all his money had been tricked away by rats in his desperation to buy medicine. With his last remaining possession, a single egg, he offered it up in his hands, seeking redemption. The high priest accepted the egg with a smile and declared that the gods had forgiven him. The farmer couldn't believe it and continued to bow his head in gratitude. The ritual continued until dusk. Suddenly, a priest leaned in close to the high priest's ear and whispered that the rat had brought news. It seemed that more and more sick people were being taken away from the city outskirts. Following the church's previous instructions, the high priest needed to fully utilize the plague and the antidote to convert as many followers as possible. In a small room located in the basement, the high priest encountered the rat. His appearance truly resembled that of a rat. After introducing himself, the rat explained what he had seen and heard in the past few days. He had witnessed ships on the canal continuously ferrying away the sick, and they seemed to have a method to cure the plague. Among this group of people, there was even a witch. The rat had spotted a flying witch in the sky. The high priest inquired about their numbers, to which the rat responded that they had no armor, no horses, and their weapons consisted of long wooden weapons. There were approximately 100 of them, and it seemed they were recruited by the lord of the border town. In response to the rat's information, the high priest tossed a crystal vial as a reward for the rat's efforts. Upon catching the vial, the rat's hands trembled uncontrollably. Suddenly, his body jerked, and his eyes widened in shock. A slender dagger pierced through his neck, its tip gleaming with an eerie cold light. Standing behind him was none other than the elderly woman. The old woman effortlessly lifted the corpse, and after seeing her leaving the room, they continued their discussion. The high priest didn't believe the rat was lying, but he had to investigate personally. If he truly discovered mercenaries and witches, he would bribe that group of thugs, numbering in the thousands. Though they couldn't compare to the Judgment Army, they were more than capable of overwhelming the unequipped mercenaries. As for the witch, he would leave it to the faceless. Offering the crystal bottle in her hands, the old woman bowed, then suddenly her entire body burst into crackling sounds as if her bones were rubbing against each other. Her figure rapidly grew, her white hair turning black in the blink of an eye. The wrinkled and loose skin tightened, regaining its tautness and elasticity. Time seemed to flow backward for her. When she stretched her body again, she transformed into a stunningly beautiful woman. The priest smiled with satisfaction, recalling this was the face of who had been hanged at the city gate. The woman nodded and approached the high priest. Among the 4 people, he had spent the most time on her. On the 3rd day, outside the eastern gate of the capital, Nightingale silently watched the group of ragged refugees. They had been gathered in waves using Echo's ability to guide the refugees and were slowly moving towards the docks with Brian. Nightingale noticed that Echo seemed sad and asked what was wrong. Echo's expression appeared somewhat sorrowful. She had always thought that she was treated coldly because she was from the Sand Tribe, but these people showed the same lack of mercy towards their own kind. Echo said, "I truly hope to see His Highness Roland become the king, to put an end to the conflicts, so that different races, ordinary people, and witches can live freely and peacefully." Nightingale smiled and replied, "That day will surely come." Echo chuckled and burst into joyful laughter, instantly lightening the sadness on her face. However, the calm did not last. After finishing lunch, Tassa, who went to the capital to gather information, brought bad news. They had received information that the rat organization had already mobilized their forces and planned to surround them. Tassa had to stay in the city tonight to oversee the sale of the medicine. He wouldn't be able to bid farewell to Axe tomorrow. Axe patted Tassa's arm and said, "We'll see each other when His Highness visits the capital in the future." The Faceless had already quietly crossed the canal long before the sun completely set, sneaking towards the rear of the mercenary camp. As a member of the arbitration court, she had assisted the bishop in dealing with many fallen ones, including witches who defected from the church and religious followers corrupted by the secular world. She was dispatched to the capital to accomplish a crucial mission, to convert a man into the king of Grey Castle. Her true name was Afra. There were still patrols around the camp, and the bonfires burned brightly. Figures moved back and forth, appearing to be well organized and not in chaos. She drew a dagger from her waist and took advantage of a mercenary's diverted gaze. From a blind spot in his vision, she swiftly lunged behind him, covering his mouth with one hand and driving the dagger into his neck with the other. In the camp, lightning descended from the sky, signaling that Axe had led the rifle squad to counterattack. Everyone in the camp remained unworried about the rat organization, believing that the soldiers would repel them. The camp's security remained vigilant. Suddenly, a man walked into the clearing, then Afra felt a cold, hard object press against the back of her head. Afra felt a chill run through her entire body. How was this possible? She swallowed hard and lowered her voice. What kind of joke is this? I am Vort, you know. But instead of a response, a cold smirk echoed behind her. Nightingale, able to see the magical energy within him, knew he was not the real Vort. Afra's heart sank to the depths. This was her last chance. Realizing that her expertise lay in assassination rather than direct combat, she seized the moment. She swiftly turned, elbowing Nightingale's arm and triggering a mechanism hidden in her sleeve. In an instant, a white powder sprayed out, aimed toward the back. Then Afra lunged towards the four witches near the bonfire with a dagger. Wendy bravely jumped to shield Lily. Nightingale hesitated no longer. She raised her hands, and her shimmering silver weapon burst into flames. Afra was suddenly pushed hard, losing her balance and falling backward onto the ground. After firing her shot, Nightingale remained in place, watching as the man struck in the chest and fell, his body contorting and shrinking until he transformed back into a woman with blue hair. In her final moments, Afra reminisced about the bishop, slowly closing her eyes. Nightingale suppressed the turmoil in her heart, holstered her gun, and ran back to Wendy's side. Wendy was unharmed, with only a small hole in the outer layer of her protective suit, while the soft inner layer remained intact. Lily burst into tears, and Wendy gently stroked her head. Lily sniffled, burying her face in Wendy's chest, emitting a muffled sound. Wendy was also taken aback, having been focused on shielding them and forgetting to use her own abilities. If she had summoned a gust of wind, she wouldn't have been approached. Fortunately, they had protective suits. Before departing, His Highness Roland had given each witch a specially tailored vest, instructing them never to take it off. The vest was lightweight but appeared somewhat bulky. It seemed to be composed of multiple layers, with each layer made of highly flexible fabric adorned with a coating depicting the ability from Soraya. It was difficult to pierce with sharp objects and provided excellent defense against blades and crossbows. Without its protection, Wendy would have had a hard time lasting until they reached Manhwa for treatment. Lightning slowly descended next to the fallen witch, and she couldn't understand why she had attacked them. Weren't they all witches? Nightingale stared at the lifeless woman, who had lunged at Wendy without a hint of hesitation, only displaying determination and a sense of inevitability. Nightingale sighed. She wasn't one of us, just a pitiful individual. On the eve of their journey back to the border town, the large-scale night assault that had long been detected ended with 1 dead and 4 injured by the First Army. The battle was not uneven, the enemies couldn't even get close to them. Soon, the rat organization scattered, and the 4 wounded soldiers had their wounds bandaged. With Lily present, there was no risk of infection. As for the soldier killed by the witch, he was properly laid to rest, and the entire group attended his funeral. This was the First Army's first expeditionary operation, not a failure but not an outright success either. With complex emotions, they embarked on their journey back home. On a ship, a tall and rugged-looking man was explaining his knowledge of the sea. Tilly, filled with curiosity, asked many questions of this great explorer. He was Thunder, the first explorer to discover the Shadow Isles. However, since his disappearance in a shipwreck 2 years ago, many believed he had tragically perished. Little did they expect him to appear on Slumbering Isle, where he made an agreement with Princess Tilly to chart new sea routes, map the seas, and search for more ancient relics, with the assistance of witches sent by Tilly. As for the 2 missing years, it was a topic they had not mentioned, and Tilly remained silent about it. However, she couldn't help but feel that His Highness knew something, or else they wouldn't have such a strong understanding between them. Thunder looked at Molly, grateful that she had summoned the large creature yesterday, which helped the ship to remain unscathed even during the fierce storm. The crew members who had initially been resistant to Molly and the other witches were now in awe and admiration, and gained much respect to her. Thunder often pondered that perhaps witches were the most suitable explorers. After all, they had qualities that others didn't possess. Tilly smiled faintly and said, "There is already a witch that inherited the title of the most outstanding explorer." Thunder took a deep draw from his pipe, exhaling a long trail of smoke, saying, "Let's hope so." Molly followed the sailors and learned how to fish. Suddenly, a dark shadow appeared beneath the emerald waters, and as Molly's familiar pulled on the fishing rod, the resistance grew stronger. It was about to surface. The sailor urged Molly to quickly let go of the fishing rod. Before he could finish his sentence, a strange creature had already leaped out of the water, opening its large mouth and lunging toward Molly. It seemed it was about to devour Molly. However, Ash was faster than the creature. She scooped up the little girl with her left hand and swung her giant sword with her right, smashing it onto the attacker's head. The monster let out a painful shriek as it was sent crashing down from the air, desperately flailing its 6 legs, attempting to escape back into the water. But Ash did not give it that chance. She set Molly down, gripped her sword with both hands and ruthlessly impaled the creature, pinning it to the deck. According to rumors, these were supposed to be mutated sea spirits, but in reality, they were demonic beasts. The lookout suddenly shouted, "Fog is forming! Stay alert, everyone!" Thunder commanded loudly, "Lower the sails, we are entering the shadowed isle." Ash noticed that the previously clear sky suddenly turned dark, and the emerald green sea transformed into inky green as if a pool of ink was spreading beneath the water's surface. Before long, the ship was enveloped in thick mist, and Ash stood at the stern unable to see the figures at the bow. With the assistance of the witches, they could anticipate danger in advance. Thunder explained that the tides here occur every half-month and are extremely fast. Tilly asked why they didn't wait for the seawater to recede completely before proceeding. Thunder explained that they couldn't wait because once the tide receded, they wouldn't be able to see the ghostly Crimson River anymore. Soon, they witnessed several red figures appearing in the dark green waters. They flickered past like phantoms. These were the unique fish of the Shadow Isle. Gradually, the fish multiplied, gathering beneath the ship, making it seem as if the sailing vessel was being carried by the fish. If it weren't for their opposing directions, Ash would have even felt as though the ship was being lifted by the fish. Thunder explained that the main island resembled a triangular tower with a massive hollow passage running through its center. These crimson-scaled fish liked to lay their eggs and reproduce in the cavern. During low tide, the hollow would emerge above the water's surface, and the resident fish would be the first to sense the changing water levels and swarm out. So, as long as they followed the ghostly Crimson River, they would reach the main island of the Shadow Isle. They soon arrived at the Shadow Isle. They waited until darkness fell and the seawater receded completely to the bottom of the cave. Seizing the opportunity, Thunder commanded the sailors to anchor the ship and secure it to the copper stakes at the entrance of the cave with sturdy hemp ropes. Pointing towards the ancient ruins above, the upcoming journey could only be described as unimaginable. The witches followed Thunder and his companions, entering through a stone door at the bottom of the colossal abyss. They ascended the winding stone steps, where water trickled and murmured. Despite holding torches, the flickering flames seemed feeble and insignificant compared to the seemingly endless staircase. Progressing through the abyss-like darkness, Tilly tightly clutched Ash's arm, displaying a vulnerability that was absent from her usual confident demeanor as the fifth princess, who faced difficulties with unwavering confidence. Her greatest weakness was fear of the dark. As they reached the deepest part of the cave, they arrived at a massive door, not made out of stone, but towering metal door.